Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I can't believe this is our fifth session. Oh my goodness. We will keep going as long as for the next foreseeable future. So if you guys show up here, I'll be here. What I try to do with each session is kind of look at the theoretical and then the tools and theoretical and tools, and make sure that we're kind of moving the needle for ourselves and our communities. Today we're going to talk. I'm excited about today because it's one of the topics that I think is so cool. Is the biology of trauma. We've talked a lot about the physiology and the brain structure. We're going to talk about biology. At some point, we're going to talk about the vagus nerve, which is chock full of tools. We'll just, as long as we get to talk, we'll always be talking about something exciting and new, and that's just really cool. So today, I just want to jump in. Let's go back to kind of the foundation is that, remember our electrical charge, and here's our brain here, and our body's electrical, and during an overwhelm moment, season, lifestyle, the brain adjusts to survive. And as it adjusts to survive, those behaviors look like. So like in the individual, it can look like hyperarousal or like this, or it can look like shutdown. It can look like feeling numb. It can look like dissociation. In our communities, it can look like lateral violence. It can look like spikes in addictions or suicidal behaviors. And if you pare it down to what the individual is experiencing, it's a sense of overwhelm stored in us for the purposes of survival. And we label it overwhelm because that's what it feels like in my body. That's where it goes up into my processing part of my brain and says, this is overwhelm, or this is anxiety, or this is stress, and it behaves accordingly. So what we want to do is start interrupting things, getting to know it, how it functions and what it is, and then start interrupting things and help the brain and body start to recover and create sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. And I'll probably say this introduction every time because I truly believe it. I just had somebody in here. They just left about 15 minutes ago. I said, I got to kick you out. I'm talking to Rosebud. I got to kick you out. So they struggled with having sovereign moments. They struggle with claiming victories in their lives, that this person has been sober for about 6 months and claiming that victory because there's so much shame associated with this sense of overwhelm and feeling like we don't have control. And there's a lot of shame in that. And what she is starting to do is just start to claim some of my victories. Today, I feel positive, and that's a victory. I was able to walk into a home where I was abused before and without feeling overwhelmed because of the tools that we used with her. And that was a victory for her. So we want that over and over and over and over again. That's how we transform our communities. But, sorry, there's a but there. Understanding that childhood trauma dramatically interferes with our ability to self-regulate, to both psychologically and somatically. The information my body gives me is just too much, and so it creates this behavior over and over and over again. And here's one thing that we need to understand about trauma is that it is single trial learning. So when you go to school, when you were in school, when I was in school, you get taught the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 4. And so pretty soon it just becomes part of memory. That when you grow up, you're building a house and you have 2 boards and you need 4 boards. I guess it's gonna be a small house. So, and then I need 2 more boards for my house. And because it was rote memory, multi-trial learning. What's fascinating about trauma is it is single trial learning. It doesn't take multiple events for the brain to say, wow, I get it. This is huge. And this is a threat. And so what it does, it fires and wires that immediately. It fires and wires the sense of overwhelm to the snapshots of the event. Remember, the amygdala takes all these snapshots. So those things become fired and wired. It only takes one time to do that. So what we try to do in cognitive work is saying, well, think about it differently, think about it, think about it differently, which is just located in a different part of the brain. So we're trying to the tool doesn't match up. But what we see is this behavior over and over and over and over again. Who studied with that with the rats? I'll remember at some point. I'll do the dog one. This was Seligman's dog experiment, where they had dogs in one part of the room, and there was a hole in the wall, and they could go through the hole and get to the other side of the room. And so the dogs kind of practiced that, and then they closed the hole, and then they charged the floor. And the dogs were like, dude, what are we supposed to do? We can't get out of here. And then they turned it off and they turned it on again. The dogs, what are we supposed to do? This is awful. And then they opened up the door to see what the dogs would do. And they didn't leave. They didn't walk through the door. Then a couple did. And some never left. They stayed in there. Pretty soon, the researchers had to go in there and get the dogs out of there. And then do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And some of the dogs, it took them like 30 some tries to get the dog to understand that you have an option here. And if we look at behaviors of some of the folks in our communities, is they don't understand yet that the door is open for them. And what we want to do is make sure that the door is open for them, that we have the tools and the skills and the understanding that say, we have something here for you that we believe can be useful for you. And what we do in trainings like this is understand it at a deeper and deeper and deeper level. So let's talk about what these things can look like. So just to kind of call back a little bit, when that traumatic moment occurs, or event or season, this thing here goes here, which is my limbic system, my amygdala. Do you guys remember all this stuff? Good. It affects my thalamus, which is the information I get from my body. And the thalamus just says it's all too much. It's all overwhelmed. You don't have the capacity to take care of it. And we fight, flight, and just like this. So what that can look like in our communities, there's 7 domains that is broken down into 7 domains of impairment. And I'll just kind of walk through some of the domains and give you a couple of things. I think next time I'm going to, I don't do my PowerPoint on my camera, but I do have a TV screen that I'm going to put here. I just have to have my IT guy come in here and tell me how to do it, because I'm kind of a big dumb animal. So once he comes in and tells me how to do that, then I'll show you these slides, that a couple of them that I won't show you all my slides, because a lot of my slides are just like one word that says say this, or tree, or shoe. They're just kind of cues for me to remember. That's just my style, I guess. I don't know, or my laziness. But some of them I would like to show you. So one of the domains is attachment. How we connect with one another in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. So when there's this complex traumas, that attachment can look like problems with boundaries, knowing what I should and shouldn't do with people or around people. There can be social isolation is part of a boundary issue, or distrust of people. Difficulty knowing how other people feel, attunement, difficulty with attunement. And if you remember our brain talk, this guy right here behind this eye helps me with attuning to other folks, and it shrinks. So we have trouble knowing how other people feel. So our behaviors look like they don't care about it. We don't care about other people. We seem like we're all about ourselves. Those are your attachments. That's the domain one. Domain two is biology. Sensory motor development problems. So maybe if we have a lot of traumas or if there's been big events, we may look uncoordinated. And this can be children through adults. There may be lack of coordination. Remember I talked about numb spots on the body, analgesia, which is just numb locations on the body, somatization, stomach problems that can be picked up on an x-ray, headaches, backaches, things like this that wouldn't show up in any kind of medical test. Increased medical problems like asthma. Remember we talked about constriction can contribute to asthma. Number three, so we have number one is attachment, and I'll show you guys this slide and the tree slide for sure. Attachment, biology, affect regulation. So affect is the way that we present ourselves. So when I see Annie, when she gets on, she smiles and I smile, and our affect is connecting to each other. But with complex traumas, we have trouble with that. So we have difficulty with emotional self-regulation. I don't know when to be calm. I have trouble sustaining my calmness. Sometimes I just bounce off the walls. Difficulty labeling and expressing feelings. Let that park for a second. Difficulty labeling and expressing feelings. Those things are taught in homes. If we are sad, mad, angry, happy, frustrated, and there's this huge menu of things that they could be. But what I've noticed with trauma is it's narrowed down to happy or angry, or happy or crying. All this stuff, this big menu of things that they could be, get funneled down into these things. And so there's not a big palette of how we can express. And we're taught that in our homes. But if a home is a traumatized home, or if there's drinking in the home or inconsistency in the home, this stuff isn't being overtly taught. We're not saying, well, that must be this, that looks like this. And as well parents in our native communities, we need to start actively, overtly teaching these things. Otherwise, our kids grew up thinking you can be angry or you could be sad. So my son Parks, he'll be 13 on Sunday. Golly! But a long time ago, I'll say even 9 years ago, maybe 9-10 years ago, Gracie was sitting in front of the TV watching, I don't know, this is back when she watched Dora. And so she's sitting here watching Dora, and Parks is standing behind her, maybe from me to 3 feet away. He's got a handful of squinkies. You guys know what squinkies are? Those little figurines. They're princesses and superheroes, and they're about that big and they're rubber. Perfect thing for a 3-year-old to have in his hands. So he's got a handful of squinkies, and he's standing like 3 feet from Gracie, just ready to whip them at the back of her head. He's like this. And I walk in, and I want to say, because that's just what a good dad does. I want to say, but if a child is, remember a pendulation, if the sympathetic's already here and I yell at him, he doesn't say, gosh, Dad, thanks for yelling at me. That really calmed things down. Nope, it does the opposite. It goes, boom, it cranks it up some more. The sympathetic system, the jacked up system. So I got to choose my menu here of options. Like, let's say Parks, and he's like this. Yeah, Dad. And I said, are you gonna throw those at Grace? And he was like, yeah. And I said, you want to give me those instead? I get down on my knee. I said, you want to hand me those? And he's like, okay. So he hands them to me. And I said, do you have like is it tight right here in you? And he said, I feel like that. And I said, I have that sometimes too. And I call it frustrated. And I said, can you say that word? And he said, frustrated. He said his R's like W's back then. Frustrated. And I said, how about next time you feel frustrated, when you feel that, when you feel frustrated, just give me a holler and we'll figure out something else besides throwing spankies at Gracie. And He said, okay. And then we go play something else. Kind of gave a little, you see to me lesson. You see to me? And so what I tried to do was explain to him that this somatic base has a name. It doesn't have to be anger. It doesn't have to be hurt. Maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's excitement, but it has a name. And so I said, next time you feel that, let me know and we'll figure something else out. And come to find out, he feels frustrated a lot. I didn't get a lot done that year because you're like, Dad. So part of what we do in the process of healing and sculpting the minds of our young people is engaging them to what does this feel like? Do you remember Schachter's work? I think I mentioned Schachter already, where we get information from the body and then we label it. That's how it's always been that way. It hasn't been we think about it and then it occurs. We get the information and then we label it. It goes up through here, the neurons in the neck, and then the thalamus, and it's this. And then we label it, or it's lifting, and we label it excitement, or it's light, and we label it happy. But we've always done this. But remember, trauma and traumatized homes do all sorts of mislabeling of things. So we got to make sure that we're teaching what this is in this moment. Okay. Number 4, so we have attachment, biology, affect regulation, dissociation. Do you remember that from our 4 horsemen of trauma? Dissociation, amnesia, poor memory. What's really cool about how we're put together is this guy here, the amygdala. It is you. Your amygdala is you. And mine is me. It knows, it's part of all my information centers. So it knows what's going to be too much for me. What information is going to send me into overwhelm. So if there was an abuse event or a car accident, it just kind of limits the access of the information that we get. It's almost like if you put a piece of paper, a black piece of paper, and put holes in it like this and then held it up to a light. You get some of it, but you don't get all of it. And that's why a lot of folks have poor memory, particularly about the events, the big events that have occurred in them, the traumatic events, and they feel crazy because of it. And they said, I feel crazy. I don't remember it. I know it happened. I just don't remember it. Well, that's just their body protecting them from overwhelm. I don't think I've shared with you guys, but we were in a tornado 10 years ago. That's why we moved back here to New York. We were in Oklahoma. I was teaching at OU, and our house was hit by a tornado, and we were inside of it. And the sirens went off, and I went outside like a good Oklahoman. I went outside to see where the tornado was, and I get on my back porch, and I turn. It was in my driveway. And so I turn around, and I sprint to go back into the house, and it picks me up. It kind of dribbles me a couple times, and then I lay down flat. And I remember looking at my fingernails because there was a little line in the pavement, and I thought, oh, I'm going to put my fingernails in the pavement, and that should keep me from being sucked up by this tornado. I have very strong cuticles, apparently. And it took a breath, and I stood up, and I ran and opened the door and turned around and slammed the door behind me, and then everything collapsed. And I turned around, and Carminda, my wife, is getting in the closet with our daughter, Grace. And she says, "Dare!" She screams at me. And I start to run toward her. I say, "What?" She said, "It's a tornado." And I said, "No." And then she said, "Parker is in our bedroom taking a nap," which was over there. She's in the closet with Gracie. I think she thinks maybe Gracie has higher earning potential or something. So I run over and grab Parks and grab him and put him on my arm and run into the closet and lock the door so the tornado can't get in. Long story short, it's too late. It destroyed the house, and we ended up moving back here to New York. And we all have very different understandings, comprehensions of the tornado. Carminda doesn't remember much about it at all. Gracie Constriction had settled in on her like this for a while until we got rid of it. And we got rid of it, and we're going to get to the point where I'm going to show you those stuff. Parks, his was looked like ADHD, it's hyperarousal. And we've largely gotten rid of that as well. But it didn't really settle in on me in any of those ways. Why? I'm glad you asked. Because out in the tornado, I had two options: to fight or flight. And my brain geared up. There's my buddy here. For fight or flight. And I used it for the purposes that it was intended for. I fought and run and run and run and run and run. My family was in a closet constricted. So trauma is in the freeze, the inability to use that jolt for what it was for. And like I said, and the kids, we've largely gotten rid of it. Constriction and hyperarousal. Carminda was in poor memory of the event. So a dissociative state, amnesia or poor memory of the event, depersonalization is part of this dissociative state that I'm just not in here. You remember that when we talked about the 4 horsemen of the trauma? I'm just not in here. Next one, remember we have attachment, biology, affect regulation, dissociation, and the next one is behavioral control. There's 7. Behavioral control. And this is stuff that we as educators, as psychologists see often. I hear about it in schools quite a bit. The poor modulation of impulses, self-destructive behaviors, aggressive toward others, eating disorders, substance abuse, oppositional behavior. Those are the things that what trauma looks like. And I really want to emphasize that, because this is where you get into the DSM, wherever that may be. I see it. And you say, oh, this looks like ADHD, and it's a behavior problem. This looks like oppositional defiance. Well, that's a behavior problem. So they get this label, but what I'm much more curious about is what's occurring, the what and the where, and what can we do about it. That's what I'm more curious about than the labeling of anything. How can we help them move the needle? How can we start healing folks? Next one is thought processing. So attachment, biology, affect regulation, dissociation, behavior control in cognition, thought processing. Looks like ADHD can't keep focused, difficulty planning or anticipating, everything that you would associate with this guy right here. Do you remember that this guy here helps with executive functioning, thinking things through, pros and cons, things like that? That's that guy right there. So it affects the cognitive functioning part of our brain. And the last one, number 7, is self-concept. Disturbance in body image, low self-esteem, which is kind of a nebulous term, low self-esteem, almost like there's a sense of shame associated with it, which is also kind of nebulous, but feeling like there's isolation because I'm the only one that feels this way, and I do behaviors that I can't control. There you go. I think I like that better. That I live in this silo. I'm the only one that feels this sense of overwhelm that leads me to drink or use or hit or pick fights in class or not be able to pay attention in class. So it makes my grades poor. So we have people that have the sense of shame about that. And I really want you to hear me say this, is that you've just been wired for survival. And I'll tell people that. Good for you. You made it. You made it in 6th grade. You've made it, you're 57-year-old, whatever it is. You've made it this far. You've been wired for survival for a long time. And now we can kind of give the message to the midbrain, to the body, to the vagus nerve, that we don't need these particular tools anymore. Okay, so that's that. Let's dive into biology. And I can't believe time's going by so fast. So biology, my favorite book on how trauma is stored in our genes. Even just a few years ago, I remember somebody saying, you have the audacity to talk about the genetic parts of trauma, which, I was just showing the research on it. And there's plenty of research. There's a whole field on epigenetics, how the environmental influence on gene activation. My favorite book on the topic, if you guys want to read a book about this, if some of that interests you, it doesn't interest everybody, and that's okay too. It's called The Biology of Belief. That's a cool book. It's called The Biology of Belief, and how our environment fires our gene activation. So basically, that trauma can be stored in us in our DNA. So the DNA strand changes, the methylated, it's called methylation, how it stores that trauma. So my great, 4 generations, they found it in humans, this gene scarring. My great grandfather was attacked. Let's say he was attacked by a buffalo. And how does he tell me in 2021 to watch out for buffalo? And if there's things that happen to me in my life now, how do I tell my great grandchildren? It's the way for me to communicate with them. Just how we're set up, and it's awesome and it's beautiful. It's my way of connecting down the line and how I've been connected to down the line. It's pretty amazing. I love it. So let's see, my great grandfather, 4 generations, was attacked by a buffalo in the southern plains of southwest Oklahoma. And in the middle of it, all the stuff we've talked about with trauma, and the brain and everything, is changing in him. But this gene says, geez, this is a big deal. How am I going to tell my great grandson not to walk into a herd of buffalo? And so this genetic scarring occurs of this moment and then is thrown into the gene pool. So subsequent generations swim in that gene pool. So then let's say my great, his son, is still part of the Southern Plains buffalo culture. And then let's say this person, one generation, they weren't raised in the buffalo culture. Let's say I was raised in town. I didn't pass one buffalo on the way here today from my house. So I didn't need my buffalo Hulk out gene. And my son probably, I don't know what the future holds, but let's say he doesn't either. So that becomes dormant over time if it's not needed. You with me there? If it's not needed. But if it's still active, if we're still wrestling buffaloes, then it is still needed and it stays active then. Same with if there was 4 generations ago was colonization and there was the beating of the men. And then the men became abusive and so on and so on and so on and so on. And it stays active in me and so on and so on and so on. It just gets passed on in those ways. Okay. Has a happy ending, so hold on. Geneticists were surprised to find, this is out of the Biology of Belief book, that epigenetic changes pass down, epi above the gene, environmental influence of the gene. Epigenetic change could be passed down from parent to child, 1 generation after another. In human studies, they found it to go 4 generations. In insect studies, they found it to go 12 or 13 generations, this genetic scarring. According to new insights of behavioral epigenetics, traumatic experiences in our past or our recent ancestors' past leave molecular scars adhering to our DNA. So experiences of our ancestors are never gone, even if they've been forgotten. They become a part of us, a molecular residue holding fast to our genetic scaffolding. The DNA remains the same, but psychological and behavioral tendencies are inherited. You might not have inherited not just your grandma's knobby knees, but also her predisposition toward depression caused by the neglect maybe she suffered in a boarding school. We've called it blood memory forever. It's just that scientists has given it a fancy name in the past probably 10 years. But here's what's cool. Are you ready? Here's our happy ending. Come on. Come on. we just don't get the hurt that's passed along. We don't get just the scarring that's passed along. We can also receive the strengths that are passed along. Think about it. We shouldn't be here. According to sociology, we shouldn't be here. There's been genocidal tactics against the native population forever. And logically, we shouldn't be here, but we are a resilient, powerful people. Not just surviving, we're thriving. And that strength was handed down generation after generation after generation. So the field of epigenetics and the scarring of the DNA, it's not only part of deficits, it's part of strengths that are passed down. So listen to this. My 3 chocolate kids sitting at home right now, theoretically then, are the strongest native generation that has ever lived. Come on. Come on. They are the strongest native generation that has ever lived. Why? Because all the strength that's been passed on sits in them right now as they sit at home and play Fortnite. That is unbelievable to me. So here's what I have to do as daddy bear. I can't let my kids take the easy road, because just like the things that need to be activated, that are activated because of stress, their body has to feel the healthy challenge and nurturing and support, but has to be pushed a little bit for that to kick in. We're not using all of our genes. We're not using everything. The stuff we need, we're using. So if I can challenge my children in good ways and support them at the same time and give them scaffolding, saying, here's our world, and if you fall, I'm gonna be here to pick you up. But challenge yourself, then they have their superpower. Your kids do too. Your grandkids do too. Whew. That makes me excited for them 3 little buggers. So here's Bruce Lipton, the guy who wrote that book, The Biology of Belief. Here's one of my favorite quotes of his. The genes are the brick and mortar. The environment is the contractor. I'm gonna say that again. Genes are the brick and mortar. The environment is the contractor. So I was blessed to have Charles and Donna Tonemah as my parents. They're still here. They're still with us. They're both in their mid to late 80s. I cooked dinner for them last night. We moved here to New York so we could shovel for them. When necessary, we cook for them and hang out with them, and it's just an honor to do that for them. And when we were young, between us, this is our 5th session, people, we know each other really well. I know the blank screen of you very well. I haven't always been this sexy. I used to be 5'4" by 5'4". And I mean, you guys remember Captain Kangaroo? I know that's kind of an old school reference. For you younger schools, Darth Vader's helmet, that's what his hair looked like. Captain Kangaroo, like that. Or Darth Vader's helmet, whatever lands on you best. And that was my hairdo. I had Darth Vader's helmet hairdo, and I was 5'4" by 5'4", and I lived in Standing Rock. What I'm saying is, I was meat at that time. This is before the word bullying was even a thing. And I wasn't Lakota. I was a different tribe. I looked like that. I would have given myself a wedgie had I seen myself in the hall. So it was rough. And I would get beat up and duct taped to poles and put upside down in trash cans. And I remember going home, and I couldn't wait to get home, because my mom, Donna Tonemah, would open the front door after school. And if you're from Yates, we were in town. Remember the old high school? And the elementary school was behind that, and the junior high school was those pods. So that's where I went. And I'd get home, and she'd open the door, and she'd say, "There's my big boy." like that. And she put her arms around me, like if she could, her hands almost touch. And I'd be like, oh, yeah. Oh. It was a safe spot. Now listen to the necessity for that safe spot for the brain and the body and the soul and the spirit to recover. That was the saving grace. Was I went home and that I knew that was waiting for me. We have a lot of kids that don't have that. They don't have the opportunity to come up for air. Maybe for many of our kids, the school is where they come up for air. That third grade teacher is where they come up for air. I don't think I can underplay the importance of the role of the folks outside the home, creating just connections of wellness and strength for our kids. And you may not even know that you are that person, but potentially you are. You are the brick and mortar for some folks. So here's a message for our communities. Thriving as a community is survival of the healthiest group, not the healthiest individuals. And we learn that from nature. We talked about the zebra and how the zebra surrounded the other one for the purpose of healing. You can look at beehives. You can look at how geese fly. The survival of the group and how the group stays connected and takes care of each other and lifts each other determines how our communities are going to do. And what's really cool about us as native populations is we aren't just folks gathered in a town. We are on our reservations, in our communities, in our clans, that other groups don't have that kind of thing. You can go to Pierre, they don't have that. That neighborhood isn't a clan. So what we have working for us is exactly this. Thriving as a community is survival of the healthiest groups of people, not the healthiest individuals. What we do is help individuals become healthy. So when studying, this is a guy named Koenigsberg, his research, and his big quote. When studying cultured cells that are ailing, as a cellular biologist, you look at its environment. A healthy environment assists in the cell thriving. So they're looking at our microscope and say, what's going on around this cell that is making it behave this way? But in our communities, we say something like, that's just a crazy kid. Don't invite that guy to the powwow. Don't give him a ride to the powwow. He's going to screw things up. But we'll, as humans, what we'll do is we'll single out instead of inviting in and healing and healing and healing. I'll say this again from my previous quote. We suffer in silos. We heal in community. You guys ever read those books? Do I have them here? No. Outliers. There's a book called Outliers. I'm just a nerd. If I'm not hanging out or playing my guitar or playing with the kids, I am reading. And the book Outliers, one of my favorites, so it talks about how greatness, the outliers, comes with a little bit of natural skill, but effort and effort and effort and effort and effort and support and support and support and support, and things working out for this person. So how did the tallest tree in the woods get to be the tallest tree in the woods? That's the quote from Malcolm Gladwell, the writer of all this research. How did the tallest tree in the woods get to be the tallest tree in the woods? We're not on this call by accident. A lot of things had to happen just right for us to be on this call to say, how can we engage in healing the communities? So when you look at, on my backyard, there's a field, and then there's a bunch of trees back there. And one of those trees is the tallest one. One of them, I don't know which one it is, but one of them is the tallest tree. So how did it get to be the tallest tree in the woods? Why isn't another tree the tallest tree in the woods? Because a lot of things had to go right for that tree. It had to, maybe when it was tiny, maybe a bird didn't come and eat the seed, but ate the seed of one close to it. Maybe it was a little bit bigger, a rabbit didn't gnaw on it. Maybe it got a little bit bigger, kids weren't playing in the woods and didn't step on it. Maybe it got bigger, somebody chopping wood, left it alone. Maybe the one next to it was hit by lightning, so it got more sun and it got more rain. A lot of things have to happen just right for that tree to become the tallest tree in the woods. And why do we say this? Because it was in a community. And if you're on this call, you're kind of committed to that idea that we thrive in communities and we help each other grow in communities. And there's a certain level of humility with that. That's a very native way of thinking. Is there's not that tallest tree isn't saying, look at me, I'm the tallest tree. The tallest tree is acknowledging that so many things had to happen for this to occur. And we're becoming educated. Me, just like you, are becoming educated. Well, how can I help other people thrive in my communities? And that's a commitment. And one of the things that, just in closing today, one of the things that I want to make sure that we don't do is make this series, even if it's a 6-month-long series, we don't make this series an event. We don't make this understanding, this collaboration, an event. Because we get excited and we learn things and we learn skills and tools. And an event, by definition, has a beginning and an end. And so if we approach this as an event, and then when it ends, we say, well, I enjoyed some of that, parts of that. I'm glad it's over. Now we have free time. Then it just became an event and we had some cool conversations. But for the healing in our communities, it's got to be sustained. It's got to be a way of being from now on. And it's got to be cross-generational. It's got to be the youngers, the tweeners, and the elders have to get on board with this. And then leadership has to say, yes, we want our community to start operating in this way, and we start lifting each other and supporting each other and caring for each other. There's one more thing I want to say about that. So the last thing I'll say today is on Bruner's, on scaffolding. I mentioned scaffolding, and I think I needed to flesh it out just a little bit more. So scaffolding is tied right into how does the biggest tree get to be the biggest tree. Scaffolding is a lot of use in education. So here's the framework of our community, of even to the smaller scale of your home, or even of your relationship with your honey. Here's the scaffolding of it, and here's how we build up within it. And the bricks and mortar are going to be some of the DNA of those things, but it's going to work within the capacity of this. So if I set healthy limits and healthy boundaries, and I support when it starts to tip one way or another, my relationship, my community, my family, I've created good things around it. So if a building is being built and it's built crooked, you don't say, oh, those stupid bricks. You don't do that. You look at the contractor, you look at the way that it was set up and how it was put together well. And as part of our collaborations and moving forward, we have to look at how we scaffold, how we support, how we lift each other. And I'm not even sure how many people are on this call, but it doesn't take, I'm not sure if I shared this last time, but I'll share it again now if I didn't. It takes 9% of a population to start turning the tide. I'm not sure if I shared this last time. From Rensselaer University, they found that it doesn't take everyone in your community to say, okay, let's do this, because you're not going to get everyone. I'm not going to get 100% of Tuscaroras to say, yeah, let's do this. But they have found that it takes 9% of a population to start helping turn this way. And you have relatives, so probably the people who are on, all your cousins, all your relatives, your aunties and uncles, that's probably 9% of your community right there. And if we can start engaging people in the things that we're talking about here, we can turn this. But it's not going to happen by accident, and it's not going to happen in a moment. It's going to happen with consistency. So I always like to leave about 10 minutes at the end for people who have questions or comments or thoughts about things we talked about today. I really loved the things we get to cover today, the research, because I always like talking about it and teaching on it. So do you want to add anything, Annie? Do we have questions, comments, or thoughts?